All right. Hey, Rob. Welcome to our webinar today. I'm excited to chat with you. For everyone, I know folks are still joining in, so we'll give everyone a minute or two to settle in, and then we will get started.
Excellent.
Cool. I can see people coming in. Yep. Thanks for doing this, Rob. I know this is a interesting topic. We've gotten quite a huge demand on this webinar, so it seems this is top of mind for privacy professionals, and yeah, would love to get insights from you.
Happy to be here.
Perfect. Cool. All right. We are 1 minute in. We have a few folks in, so we will get started. So on today's agenda, we're going to talk about the agenda really is closing the gaps in cookie banner compliance. I mean, since we are in 2025 and it's been quite a few years since GDPR came in, it's an interesting topic to talk about cookies in 2025. We will expand that thought, but the overall goal is to educate and tell everyone about what are the common pitfalls, what's happening on the cookie side, pixel side, first party, third party cookie. Websites itself are pretty dynamic in nature, so things keep changing. So um, we will talk about all of that. Some housekeeping items before we start the webinar. This webinar is being recorded. We will share the recording with anyone who registered after the webinar. We'll send an email. You can always access it from our resource section at any point of time in case you missed the email or didn't register. There is a Q&A tab you will see at the bottom of your Zoom panel. Please feel free to ask questions as we present. We want to make it more of a conversation. So if there's a topic that me or Rob are talking about and you have a question, don't stop. We do have a dedicated question and answer section towards the end, but feel free to put it, and I will make sure to pick it up uh, as soon as possible. So again, welcome everyone to our webinar. I'll kick start it. My name is Vaibhav. I also go by V. I'm the founder and CEO of Privado.ai. My journey into privacy started with product management and GDPR. I was working in a product role and got rushed few months from January 2018 to May 2018 to help my legal team in GDPR compliance, and saw this huge pain point where the language of privacy teams and product engineering weren't the same, and built Privado. Privado is a product privacy management platform. We scan any products your engineering teams have built, could be websites, mobile app, all the backend server side software that no one sees, to automate data map, to help you find risks like consent not working, which is what we'll talk about, and automate a lot of manual processes around data mapping, ROPAs, and DPIs, PIs. With me is Rob. Rob, over to you for your introduction.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me today. My name's Rob Priore. I'm the Senior Manager for Privacy and Compliance Technology here at ZoomInfo. You can visit our site at ZoomInfo.com. I'll talk a little more about that. I have an active CIPP US certification as well as a CDPSE, a Certified Data Privacy Solutions Engineer from Osaka. Got over 10 years experience working in information security and privacy. I worked for several years with Ernst & Young on their privacy team, advising global companies on how to align to GDPR, CPRA, and at ZoomInfo, I have a number of duties. And I did want to say, though, there will be no legal advice here. I'm not a lawyer. We're going to talk about some important things and possible repercussions from regulatory authorities. I strongly recommend, if you see any of these issues, to talk to your own legal counsel. ZoomInfo, we are the leading go-to-market intelligence platform, empowering businesses to grow faster with AI-ready insights, trusted data, and advanced automation. Our solutions provide more than 35,000 companies worldwide with a complete view of their customers, making every seller their best seller. And I refined this a little bit so that I could really hit home with any of the folks on here that might be involved in marketing or that might want to boost their sales, because obviously we don't exist without sales, do we? So ultimately, we're going to help direct your sales team's efforts by answering some critical questions, such as what company should I call on today? What person should I call at that company? And what should I say to that person? And using our tools, you don't have to listen to earnings calls or read every press release or spend hours on LinkedIn trying to find white space accounts and people to target. We do that for you. So that's my pitch. I hope it resonates with some folks. And over to you, V. Happy to get started.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. And we've been lucky to engage with ZoomInfo in multiple webinars, and I think like at ZoomInfo, especially you have privacy as a key differentiator as part of the brand story, and that comes out in multiple ways in all the posts, in all the engagements, and also your participation in our webinars where you or someone from the team has definitely highlighted that. So I think if anyone is there from the B2B side, we take ZoomInfo as an inspiration on taking privacy as a brand differentiator and leveraging it for sales as well. So I think that's exciting. So yeah, on today's agenda, we're going to talk about a few things. I think the first thing that I want to double down on is why are we really talking about cookies, websites in 2025? As per me, that should have been like a conversation which was probably closer to 2018, maybe 2020 when CPRA came, but doesn't seem like that. So we will first touch that. We'll also look at what are the common website privacy pitfalls that we see. We'll get some perspective from Rob, being our customer, using our technology, from his current experience, his past experience, and in our prep for the webinar, I did realize Rob has done all kind of manual ways to find issues on the website, and so his perspective is unique. And towards the end, we would definitely give you a quick demo of the Privado platform, especially focused on the web scanning and what you can expect. And as I said, I saw a few people raising hands. If there are any questions, feel free to put it in the Q&A section at the bottom, and I will actually pick them up as we, have the conversation forward. All right, so kicking start. So probably last year, we were doing this research on, one of the core motivation for us was our customers were really asking us to help with cookie compliance, and especially like if their banner is working on the website. That led us to a path where we published a report called State of the Website Privacy 2024. And the results were pretty interesting there. So when we did the result analysis for top 100 websites in US and Europe, 76% of websites in US did not honor the opt-out GPC signal. 74% in Europe did not work the opt-in signal. So if you, as a user, rejected cookies or took no action, cookies were still being stored, and pixels were firing. What was surprising to me was the percentage. I expected Europe to do much better than US, but it was similar. And just since we are mostly people from privacy or privacy adjacent who are here, none of these websites which were non-compliant had a banner missing. All of them had a CMP implementation. They were also blocking a lot of scripts and cookies. There were some cookies and scripts which were not being blocked, right? So what we realized was, as privacy and marketing collaborated on these websites, they put in a lot of time, energy, money, implementation to implement the CMP. But at some point of time, some misconfiguration happened, because of which some 10% of these scripts and cookies were firing, leading to about 70 issues in US and 23 issues in Europe. So this is kind of the state that we are in. And what I wanted to get, Rob, your perspective was to start with the question around what do you see as a privacy professional, enforcement trends, and why should we worry about websites and cookies in 2025?
Yeah, I have to say, internal privacy procedures, what you do inside your company usually stays inside your company. I don't know how a regulator is going to get inside your company to see if you're doing what you say you're doing. But if they visit your website, anyone can look and see if you're following the privacy requirements around opt-out, opt-in, et cetera. And there are real stakes here. There are fines that can be levied. Now, there isn't really any precedent that I know of yet for companies getting written up on this stuff, but there are a few things that are happening right now. And some of you on the call may have gotten a letter from attorneys in California suing under wiretapping laws, like the California Invasion of Privacy Act, an older law that is used to basically go after not giving notice that you're recording someone. Now, how does that work on a website? Well, if you are collecting telemetry, like how their mouse moves around, where they go from page to page. This is trying to be construed as a wiretap. Not aware that those lawsuits have been successful yet. There are a lot of pending litigation there, but why open up the doors to this kind of scrutiny? If I looked at your web, and these stats are they seem very correct. 75% are not compliant. I mean, or 76%. I mean, I can go to websites and find out in 5 minutes if they're dropping their performance and their analytics and their tracking cookies, and most of them don't. So it's like, what does that say about your company? Are you suggesting that you don't take privacy seriously? That maybe internally you don't take privacy seriously either? And then you have the ICO in the UK just announced they're going to look at the top 1,000 websites. I hope you're not in that 1,000 list, because generally they're going to run a tool like Privado, or just do a manual effort like I've been doing for years until I got to Privado, which is great. We'll talk more about that. And they're going to see that you're potentially out of compliance. You get a letter, and they'll keep following up. And it is very tricky. It is very tricky. FTC is on there too. So we're also talking about deceptive business practices. So try this one. You let someone opt out. Now they believe that they're not being tracked, but your cookies are still firing and your scripts are still loading because you don't know how to audit the site, or you don't have the technical capabilities or the staff or the time to make sure that you're actually granting this opt-out. Now you've just potentially violated Federal Trade Commission rules on deceptive practices, which will potentially end up, you're going to end up in court on that. Now, even if they're wrong, it's still going to cost you. It's still going to cost you legal time, hours and hours. For anyone that's been through that, probably someone on this call is familiar with some of these issues and some of these lawsuits that might be frivolous or not. It still costs money. So get your house in order, get the cookies down, and prove that you can get them down. And I would say you're less likely to be a target.
Absolutely. And just from a pattern, what we've seen is like, especially in the US, like either from a litigation from a plaintiff perspective, which is more around CIPA, there's been VPPA. So there's been a lot of, I would say, innovation on the litigation side by people on how to go after companies. We just saw My Health, My Data's first class action lawsuit against Amazon's SDK as well. So we'll see how it goes. But again, if you are a company which has a mobile app or a website with that specific pixel or SDK, then you have to again start to evaluate that. Another trend is like, if one AG takes an action against a specific company, then the data basically becomes public, and then other state AGs do the same. So then it starts with maybe one private like lawsuit, or maybe an AG picks it up, and then the other one. So I think especially in US, because of all the state laws, and then every state AG is trying to do something for privacy, that there is kind of this snowball effect, and that also negatively impacts, because you have to then deal with so many lawsuits and so many requests for information, and all those conversations have to happen as well. So yeah, I think that's the main precedent of why we are talking about cookie banners and websites and all these technologies in 2025. That's just from a regulatory perspective. By the way, there is a sea change of things which have happened on the technology itself, which is the kind of scripts that sits on your website, the amount of people who have access, and that's basically my next main slide, is around like, Rob, in your experience, I know you've audited a ton of websites yourself and you've gone through the process. What are the common pitfalls you see, common privacy risks on websites around cookies, scripts, tracking technologies?
They're very hard to figure out. When you engage with a CMP or a consent management platform, part of the procedure is you're going to scan the site to try and categorize the cookies. None of the tools are going to be 100% accurate on categorization. Some sites have hundreds of cookies. It's just a real manual heavy lift to actually understand what these cookies do. So you might spend several weeks trying to untangle all this stuff and talking to marketing, talking to your engineering folks, looking at some of the companies that are actually if you're using a third party to do ads on your site or to track, they may have cookies that inject other cookies. So it's just full of problems. It's very, very difficult to have a technical mastery over all these cookies. And as V mentioned earlier, a lot of organizations will do this just one time. They'll get the banner up, but websites are dynamic. So they're constantly changing. More cookies are coming in. So it really does require a significant manual effort and attention to detail to be able to really untangle the thing. And again, you may have websites that have gotten rid of cookies. There's a new marketing folks will come to you and they'll say, look, our solution's cookieless. Doesn't mean they're not taking user data, doesn't mean they're not violating consent. How are you going to know if your cookie solution doesn't even see it? It is very, very difficult. This is probably why 75% of companies are not in alignment. And I spend a lot of time looking through Google Console, looking at the code of these sites, looking at network activity, things that most compliance and assurance professionals are just not going to have the training to do. And smaller companies may not have the legal teams to look through this stuff. So there's definitely a gap. And I like the title of our webinar, the gap in cookie compliance. And I think that's highly relevant. I don't know if I answered your question, V. I hope so.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, like when we were prepping for the webinar, you mentioned about your experience in going to a website, clicking in, opening the Google Developer Console, then looking at the application, and then looking at what cookies are there. So the problem is, yeah, one problem is like you can't anticipate audit and assurance people to do that always, right? It's a complex process. I know some CMPs actually suggest that as a solution, but yeah, it's not feasible. By the way, that's how regulators sometimes or the forensic experts are actually finding these things. So it's possible to do. It just takes a lot of effort.
Absolutely,
Uh,
absolutely.
I,
And
I
you
would,
mentioned jurisdictions too. How
yes,
do you, if you're at a company that has if you're at a serious organization, there's probably very few things you can do with your work computer, like add a VPN. That's a security no-no typically. So how are you going to test whether your banner fires correctly in the UK versus Colorado versus the state of New York or Canada or San Jose, California, or France, for example? How are you going to be able to
absolutely.
determine that you're lining up to those requirements? Because every requirement is slightly different. If your button colors aren't right, you could have a problem. We'll talk more about that because Privado does provide some insight there, which is particularly useful.
Absolutely, yeah. And then like jurisdiction, especially in US with every state, and then some state has opt-out signal requirements, some state doesn't. So all those things exist, right? So I know there's a question which has come up. So let me try to also discuss that. Uh, so the question really is, it's kind of uh, focused on the publisher side. Thanks, Ross, for asking that question. It's about what level of resource, either in terms of FTEs, employees, or external consultants, or budget, do you think a global publisher needs to implement, configure, audit, and maintain a compliant consent mechanism? So Rob, I know you've had like some experience from a brand perspective, so feel free to share that. I'm also going to double down after you based on my experience working with some large publishers. But Rob, over to you to answer that first. And I
Yeah,
saw like just before you start, I think there was someone who raised their hand. So feel free to put it in the Q&A or chat. I'll pick either, but there should be a Q&A section where you can put all the questions.
it's a great question. So you start with domains. So currently at ZoomInfo, I have 20 or so domains that have separate cookie compliance requirements, that have separate codes, that have different Google tag managers. Some don't have any tag managers. It's a big mix of technology. And to gain alignment, you've got to be able to go to each site individually. I've got different people that run those sites. I've got everything is different. So multiply the work you do on one site times however many domains you have. You're talking many, many months of work. And then once you do get it established, you have to do audit. You have to go, I'm saying, again, not legal advice. In my view, because these websites are dynamic and new cookies are popping up and new things are happening, it's my view that you need to check it periodically. I would say once a month, go through, do a full audit, make sure the banners fire, make sure the cookies drop, make sure that the jurisdictional banners are working properly. This is an effort. It's an effort. I
Yeah.
don't know if it's a full-time person. It's definitely an assurance duty that a lot of companies are not putting out there, but the setup and the execution takes months and many people. And I'd love to give you a quote from what we would charge from a consulting basis. I do recommend, if you don't have the internal capabilities, you could try a third-party consultant. I used to work with EY. They've got a great team there that can probably help with this. But that costs something, but you will get the result that you're looking for. In addition to that, it's the vigilance. It's not just setting it up. I have some great quotes. One is from a marketing department saying, "Hey, we just bought OneTrust. We're compliant." I have to say, like, you hear that, and that's really, really something. If for anyone that has some experience with this, that's a sad, funny kind of thing and a scary thing to hear, because buying it is one thing, but operating it and making sure that you're compliant is an entirely different activity, and it will require you to spend money, but it's worth it in the sense that, again, I go with this philosophy of, if I can see that you're not complying with basic privacy requirements on your own website, what are you doing behind the scenes?
Yeah. If you open the front doors, then the back door is people are going to go get in and ask more and more kind of questions. I completely agree there, Rob. Just to double down on your conversation and answer Rob's question, and there's another question, we'll pick that up as well. Is this the initial effort that you put in, and a lot of time and energy goes into that, right? So you have 10 websites as a publisher or even one, and you made it compliant. You figured out all the scripts, you figured out all the cookies, and everything is golden, right? The problem is, like, privacy teams think, that's when the job ends and then they'll come back to it later. The reality is, the next week, it's very highly likely some of the new scripts will get added and the website will go out of compliance. So I would say, like, dividing it, like what most companies have now, some CMP, you need the governance around the consent solution, which is continuously auditing and scanning your website. So you get alerts back. What I've observed works well is generally you have one team, the CMP team, which is maintaining the banner across websites. They can also start to get alerts on if there are certain scripts which are not respecting the user's consent, or there are certain cookies. And then remediation is the second thing that goes back to either a marketing person internally who misconfigured something in Google Tag Manager, or maybe a web dev person who created a script and bundled 5 scripts in, and that is an essential in a marketing script all together into one, and that requires them to actually change a lot of things, right? So remediation is a different story. Just finding out things itself is you need that scanning. So that's kind of what I've seen in terms of FT. Like, you can reuse people who are managing the CMP already, and then for remediation you need all of that. Okay, there's a question around if we'll send the deck. Yes, we'll send the deck out also later, so not a problem. And then, so I think Julie asked a question. Okay, yeah, so you're just resonating that you see the same issue that you pointed out, Rob, around the OnePlus thing. Buying is one thing, implementation is secondary. Thanks, Giscard, for also saying having a forensic background is valuable. That's what I see in the people who are filing these cases, or kind of like on the regulatory sides. They are kind of more in the digital forensic side of the house. All right, perfect. So moving on, some more things. So we talked about generally, like, hey, there are a few things that could happen, right? So one is basically these cookies are firing these network calls, these scripts. So we discussed that. Another big thing that I've personally seen in US, especially where FTC was the most active for the last year, I just want to touch on that, is nothing to do with the cookie side of the house, but to do everything to do with pixels. Location data, health data, children data, sensitive data. So if you operate, let's say, a pharmacy, and if you have a pixel on your website, like a Meta pixel or TikTok pixels, these pixels and scripts and SDKs, the main job of them is to measure everything, which means if a user searches for a drug name like Advil or Tylenol, it's going to go into these pixels automatically, unless you go change the setting or you stop firing them on certain pages. That has tend to be a second big piece of pitfall on privacy on websites. Less to do with the cookie banner, a lot to do with how do you handle overall privacy hygiene on your website. That's where we've seen a lot of cases around FTC finding companies, and then data leaks happening. Metapixel breach specifically was a big one, especially last year and the year before that as well. So I would say that's another big trend we've seen is that. So if you are in the regulated space, especially, yeah, making sure you know what data goes to these pixels, because the way they're built is to get as much data as possible. That's their job. So that's what another thing. Um, uh, that was another thing. Maybe one more small thing around the CMP change itself. Again, this doesn't seem to be a big thing, but what happens over time as you democratize, especially if you're a mid-sized company with a lot of domains, the banner when you start, the text, the button color, the button text is standardized and is approved by privacy. If you're not auditing your website and also not comparing how that has changed, you might end up in a place where you have the accept, reject, and manage. And over time, someone says, "Hey, if we remove reject, we will have more better analytics. So let's just remove reject. Everyone will accept." And then that the privacy team might not know. And then, so that's another thing we've seen over time is the banner itself can change, and you're not going to open your own website. And even if you open your website daily, you might have accepted the consent long back. So it's going to reappear 12 months later. So yeah, even that changes in the button text, button color, the notice color. That's another thing that we've seen, changes over time, and is a common pitfall. Having a governance program around it makes sense. So I know there was a conversation around email as well. So I'll pick it up here, and then we'll move to the next part. So Kenneth had a question around like how does this apply to email? I think email I have not seen, except for the French regulator. I haven't seen a lot of conversation happening around email and email tracking. It's mostly to do with websites right now and mobile app. That's my experience. But Rob, any insight from you on the
Well,
email
like,
bit?
emails is usually regulated by canned spam, and the rules there, you have to include an opt-out in every marketing email that you send. That usually, in my experience, goes into a machine like Marketo where they take them off the list, and then your corporate email marketing isn't an issue anymore. This sort of thing, cookie compliance, really is squarely focused on website activity. Email marketing separate. That's something that's been well established. That's something that really CPRAs, GDPR, I mean, all of that predates. Email stuff predates that. So I would say make sure you have a link in every email that they can opt out, and make sure that your whatever your marketing platform is. Now cookies only drop in browsers. I see the question coming up. Cookie goes into your browser, and all the cookie does is store user data. And then scripts can actually launch the cookies themselves. So cookies don't typically have, unless it's a malicious cookie, which could launch a website for you to go to that has a security issue there, or they're trying to get you. That's that. But generally speaking, this is really limited to I'm visiting your website. If you put a link in the email and I go to the website, that's when the cookies are going to hit the browsers and things like that. In my experience, I don't know if we're answering your question, but it seems to be a separate issue.
Absolutely. And then, yeah, there is like another conversation around, if there is a pixel that can fire if someone opens an email, but that's mostly analytics. Okay, so there's another question around basically, um, and thanks for asking, Chris, that question. I feel this is a great question because this kind of thing happens if you don't have the right tooling in terms of monitoring. So the question, Rob, is like, should we have like a GDPR type full block, like zero load cookies unless consent is given, and then you start to open up. Now, on one hand, of course, you love to be in that place because you have no stress, but that's not realistic. Like if in California you have opt-out possibility, you would want to actually load everything, and your marketing team is legitimately like they're right to ask that because it impacts revenue. So yeah, actually, yeah, I'll ask you and then I'll try to answer what I've seen is what do you think about this approach of zero load cookies and only drop when consent is given?
Yeah, my interpretation and understanding of UK GDPR requirements starting there, you don't load anything. It's
Yeah,
always
of course.
notice and consent before. So make sure when they land, no telemetry is going, no network activity, no user data collection, zero. California is interesting because they still have the SEPA, which is separate from the CPRA. So if you land on a California site and all the cookies load and you're wiretapping them essentially, well, you might have just violated that. So in my approach, it's block everything when you land in California, potentially Canada, depending on the business that you're in, potentially Colorado, depending on the business that you're in. It's going to require your legal and privacy team to perform this analysis. Again, I'm not giving any legal advice. I'm not a lawyer. So consult your attorneys on what you can and can't do, and get a
Absolutely.
document that, by the way. That's very important. Make sure you document everything you do. In addition, I can share a story from a company I'm aware of. Well, I don't often talk about any of the business I do, and I won't mention any names, but they received a complaint under SEPA, and these attorneys are just throwing things out there. But this company was very much aligned to cookie compliance, and the violations that were sent as evidence were just not accurate. So this company could confidently respond and say, no, each of these items you've cited that's not doing anything with personal data. That's not wiretapping. It's not doing any of those things. And we respect the opt-outs. I don't have a status on what happened with that lawsuit, but if you're going to get a lawsuit like that and you don't know what's going on the website, it's going to be a lot harder to defend it. And oftentimes these lawsuits are going to look at, now that's a separate situation if it's just a legal team that's a private lawyer doing it. But if it's the Attorney General of California that sanctions you for not following the requirements, they can get you on a per violation basis. So how many people from
Yeah.
California visit your website every year, or how many people have visited that site and you didn't respect their rights? It could add up a lot. So
Yeah.
be real careful.
And also, it's not just the one-time fine, especially with these state regulators, they put you into some sort of a consent decree, where you have to like basically certify every few months, like, yeah, everything is going well, which is like a continuous work that you have put on yourself because of a tiny mistake on your website. So what I like to say is like it's a small thing, seems like a small thing, but the consequence of that could be very deep, right to the last level of internal things that you might be doing in a more manual way might have to become automated because you have to certify every 3 months or every year or every 6 months that yeah, this is what we do with data we have, and your engineers have to sign before they release a new feature. So yeah, it can quickly add up. Um, so before I go into the solutioning, I definitely wanted Rob. I know you've used Privado, our auditing capabilities. Would love to get like some sense from you of like pre-Privado and post-Privado. How have you been using it and your experience?
Yeah, yeah. No, by the way, I hope regulators don't buy Bravado.
We don't sell to regulators. So.
We know what that's going to really make things very difficult for the rest of us. Yeah, so pre-Privado, this is a manual effort. You're going to scan your websites, assume you have 20 plus domains, you're scanning all those, you're getting hundreds of cookies, and you get the dreaded unknown. And I do like it when they do resolve the type of cookie it is. The scanners will say, oh no, this is targeting, and this is a performance, and this is a strictly necessary. Strictly necessary are great. You can keep those in and not get in trouble. But now you've got the job of figuring out what all these cookies are. Are they sending network signals? And you do your best and you categorize. What I tend to do is categorize them as targeting or performance if we can't get a good resolution on it. And why can't you get a resolution? Well, if your company's been around for a while and you've had a website for a while, you probably had a lot of different people working on that site over a long period of time. And cookies sometimes persist. They stay, they might not be used, but they're still doing something. You may have cookies on there you've never heard of before. So very, very tricky. So now you've worked all that stuff out. Now you've got to go test the website. You're going to go to try these different jurisdictions. Are the banners firing? Are you blocking upon landing? When the cookies do load, do they actually stop when you opt out? And then you have to look at your network console. It's a very long manual process. Then you enter Privado. Now, Privado is going to go out and it's going to test whatever sites you put in. It's going to test you from any jurisdiction. Well, it is limited to some degree. I don't think it's any jurisdiction, but it covers the key jurisdictions. Like I can have it test. It pretends it's from California, and it goes to your site, and it clicks the banner through, and it clicks opt out of the banner, and then it looks at all the network activity and what happens after the fact, proving whether your solution is configured correctly or not. And it is very difficult to get a solid configuration. You have to be aware of what's not working, and it's difficult to achieve that without the visibility here. It'll also go to the UK, it'll go to France, it'll go to Canada, Colorado, and it'll do all this. I can't put a VPN on my corporate network. I have to use my laptop from home running NordVPN to put myself in these different countries to confirm that those banners fire as they should, that the reject all buttons are visible, that that's not dropping cookies when I land, and that when I do release it, here's the other thing: you're going to release it, and you may want to do this. Privado is an outstanding tool, but it's still, you should go double check that. See, when you opt in, all the cookies load, opt back out again. Make sure they drop after you opt out again, because they will get you on that too. There's a lot of ins and outs to this thing, but Privado illuminates many of these issues. And by doing those tests globally, that saves a tremendous amount of time and having to lug a computer in or not doing the check at all. See, that to me is probably what really is going on. I tend to be pretty, studious and, very motivated to get to the truth of things. I don't give up easily, but not everybody's like that. They may just assume that the banners fire correctly in the jurisdictions that they can't directly test. Now, Privado also provides visibility into network activity that perhaps cookies don't control. And that is something that you're not going to see in your cookie scanner. And I can share that Privado's provided me with much to investigate. And I know what to look for, and I know who to ask. And I can say, what is this script doing? Is this collecting user data? Oh, it is. Okay, well, fix it so when you opt out, it actually shuts down. And I wanted to say to everyone here, my approach is that from a marketing and sales perspective, these website tools are important. We're not trying to stop you from using them. And there's a lot you can do. There's very little that you can do that's going to be problematic. But if someone opts out, make sure it all shuts off. If you were to follow that, I really can't think of tools and things and tracking that you really couldn't do. Well, you could do everything just as long as you let them opt out, and it's a true opt out, that it does stop the tracking, that it does stop doing these activities, then you should be okay. Again, it's not my legal advice. It just seems that would be the case. If you're able to shut it all off, you're aligning to the requirements that the privacy authorities and countries in the EU and so on have put forth. So Privado provides insight I just haven't been able to get. And in many cases, even my work using Google Console and looking at all those network activities, which is dizzying. If you want to spend your time trying to figure that out, good luck with that, because it really is very complicated. I know plenty of people that have advanced degrees in software engineering, and even it's difficult even for them. So you need something that can illuminate, and Privado does do that. I'm looking forward to you showing how it works, because seeing is important. It's important to see what this thing does do for you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Rob, for the great feedback. And while I'm going to go to the next slide, I'll answer Corey's question around basically new tools are moving away from cookies to zero-party data. What are the things that you should look at? So I think things will move to scripts, fingerprinting things, local storage, network calls. All these things will happen through the website if it's less cookies. By the way, Google kind of went back on their promise of blocking third-party cookies, and it's now more of a user setting. So I don't think they will go away that fast. So yeah, that's something to look at as a privacy team as we go into. So quick on Privado. Privado does a bunch of things. We are a product privacy management tool. We scan a lot of things. We scan your websites, your mobile apps, your source code, your marketing tools. And we do all of that to do few things. We do that to automate your data maps, look at your consent experience, which is what we'll talk about, automate assessments and such. For today's conversation, of course, we wanted to focus purely on the solution that we have for cookies and website monitoring. So I'm going to get into the demo real quick. So you can, again, scan any website from any domain. What we will do is, in retail, there used to be a concept of a mystery shopper. So think of us as a mystery privacy user who's going to simulate the user experience, click on accept, reject, put opt out, and make sure no cookies get stored, no pixels get fired, your links are there, your buttons are there, and you have a 100% compliance score. And you can do it on a periodic basis as well. For anyone who is there on the webinar, you can request a free website scan audit report of your website from any jurisdiction. We have a link that someone from my team will put it on the chat as well. It's privado.ai/vConsent compliance scan. and our team will come back to you with the report later. So feel free to go on the website and request it, and we will acknowledge. Moving to the demo. Again, as I walk through the demo, feel free to put any question uh, and ask any questions, put it in the Q&A. I'll make sure to monitor. So to demonstrate Privado's capabilities, I've picked a website, privacydarkpatterns.com. It's owned by us, so there's no exposure of any other brand. We've tried to simulate the most common privacy issues we see on websites, and we are going to see what we offer. So we run the scan recently, I think this morning, 9 a.m. We ran the scan from 2 jurisdictions, UK and California. However, you can always edit and add more. So there are a bunch of jurisdictions, as you can see, different laws, Canada, China, Taiwan, Brazil. You can also put it under free scan frequency, monthly, weekly, quarterly, whatever you prefer. Once you run the initial scan, there are two key components we'll focus on. The number one is privacy issues. So the first thing is, hey, my website is not compliant. The score is 42%. So your goal as privacy is, of course, to get it to 100. So let's look into the UK checks first. So UK is all about opt-in. So the first check, it really does it. Do we even see a banner? So when we said, in our report, we saw everyone had a banner, literally everyone had a banner. Everyone has a green check because come on, who's not having a CMP banner in 2025, right? So this is kind of the website we scanned. Again, a dummy website which has issues. This is the banner which loaded. So you can see there is accept, there is only essential, there's cookie settings. You can see the CMP was OneTrust. So we pick all of these things for you. And this is a green check. And then it is running 4 tests for UK. The first test is does no action on the website, means it will not interact with the banner at all, which means it has not accepted or rejected the cookie consent, and it's monitoring what cookies are firing and if there are any pixels or network calls happening. So when the user takes no action, you can see there are two issues related to cookies. There are cookies from TikTok and cookies from Google Ad Manager, which are being set. Now, these are advertising. These are actually very problematic. You can click in and it will tell you what is the exact cookie, what were the checks which were performed, how did we get to this, what was the button that we clicked, and some guidance. For fixing it, you can send it to Jira. There is a complete workflow around that as well. Similarly, the same thing we're looking for network requests. So network requests are things like scripts firing, pixels firing. Basically, when people were saying, hey, we will move away from cookies, they're going to actually share data through the network, right? So this is still something that you need to prevent. So again, we can take some example. Maybe let's take an example of TikTok ads. And so first of all, it will tell you, hey, this pixel is firing. But then what is interesting in Privado is we'll also tell you who's responsible for it or where do you go to fix it, because that's the most important part. Figuring out you have an issue is not enough. You need to go back and fix it somewhere. So in this case, really what it's doing is saying that, hey, you have this pixel firing. It's firing through Google Tag Manager. This is where you need to go and configure it, right? And you can see it here directly and say, okay, I have to go to Google Tag Manager and fix it. So all you need to do is like assign it to the person who owns GTM and make sure they fix this TikTok pixel not firing, right? So that's how it's going to happen. So that's a unique part of Privado. The same checks then repeat for reject as well. So reject all cookies check, reject all network requests. You can see they're not the same. In reject all network requests, there are less issues than no action, which means maybe something is going right relatively as well. Now, from California, we have different checks. So California, we are running GPC checks. Now, this was a reason of fine for a certain company in California, and I'm sure the same is going to happen for Colorado and a few other jurisdictions. So in this case, what we do is we set a GPC signal in the browser, and then we do the same. We basically monitor which pixels fire and which cookies get dropped. And we are focused on advertising, right? So that's kind of the main goal. So in this case, again, from Google Ads, there is a cookie, which is ID, which is being stored. And then you have all these advertising third parties, which are firing on the page. And that's kind of the risk. So again, this gives you good insight on like, hey, we have all these issues on our website. We need to fix it to become compliant very, very fast, and you can do it on a periodic basis. There are more checks that exist on Privado. For example, dark pattern prevention. So this is looking for, do you even have a reject button? If you have a reject button, is the color same as accept, right? So these things can change over time. Monitoring change in text in button color. So that's another thing you can monitor. Does your, like sometimes you will have marketing teams create new website for a certain campaign, they will not have all the links. Like you might want a do not sell or share link on your website, but you don't have it. So you can also track regulatory links on the website and if they are actually appearing or not. There are checks for Google Analytics. There are checks also for if you have a user session recorder. So this is for the SEPA. You can see this policy focuses on SEPA and all the wire types act. So if I had Hotjar, it will create an issue, which I don't. So this is completely fine. And then cookie compliance check. So from UK, it's looking at, do we have a cookie which has expiry more than 13 months? Because, that's, a long expiry. And we have like two cookies which have 400 days. So yeah, at least what I know, Canel gave the recommendation of 13 months, and this is more than that. We also tell you if you have uncategorized cookies, which means there are cookies which are being set on your website, which are not part of your CMP. So you have not disclosed them. It's not part of your cookie policy. So that's another issue. So it's telling us that double click, we haven't declared. So again, notice and transparency starts to fail. So this is just the first phase. This is just giving you a quick insight on what all issues exist, things that you can fix to become compliant. Rob, I know you've seen this on your own sense, but yeah, anything that you want to add before I move further?
Yeah, I've actually used the issue. I like the issue tab there. If you go overview to issues, it kind of like it drops them all down and I can go down each one. But I have used it to adjust our OneTrust on certain subdomains because it'll provide the initiator. It'll tell you which cookie, it'll tell you what script is launching it. And then I can go to OneTrust and pop that into the sources section and it'll start blocking that cookie. So really invaluable to have this kind of insight. And again, you'd have to do it manually. And in some cases, you really wouldn't be able to be this specific and precise. It's just very difficult to do it. So
Absolutely. And there's a question around, did you mention scripts might exist that are collecting data that are not cookies and won't be captured in a cookie banner setting? Is this something marketing people create themselves? How do they get there? Yeah, that happens quite a lot, like especially on the advertising, when they'll scripts load more scripts, which not necessarily will drop a cookie, but will read the data from the already set cookies. So that definitely happens. And these are all, technologies marketing teams can use. So
and you can block those, even if they're cookieless.
they
They can
can, yeah,
block. You just have to talk to the right
absolutely.
people to get that done. They can code off and key off of things like OneTrust or Transcend or whatever tool you're using to maintain, to do your banners and maintain compliance.
Yeah. Rob, I think there's a question like from your remediation perspective, how do you block? Like, okay, you discovered, for example, certain calls that needed to be blocked. You looked at the initiator chain, and just card question is, how do you block it then?
Okay, so I'm not the OneTrust instructor, but what you typically have to do is you have to go into your domain, and so I'll relay how you do it in OneTrust. You get a list of your websites, you go to the categorizations, you bring up that specific website, you find the cookie that's associated with that script, which Privado can show you, or you just happen to know that. Then inside that cookie, you click into that and you'll see a few tabs. One of the tabs is sources. You go into sources and then you're going to see a bunch of scripts. And how that works is it tells OneTrust that, hey, when this script is there, you need to block this cookie, right? So if the script isn't in the source list, it's not going to block anything. Now, that's if you're using the OneTrust auto block. If you're actually using Google Tag Manager or Telium or other tag managers to do this, you have to go into that to make sure that has the script that it needs to block. This is not an easy thing, folks. Like this requires a lot of people to do, but where Privado comes in is that they're going to at least point out what's wrong with it. And then it's up to whoever it is that's going to fix it. And luckily, I don't have to fix it, which is good. But, I'm writing engineering tickets in Jira to get these things fixed. So Privado is providing a very valuable and time-saving solution to be able to identify these.
Absolutely. And so we're going to move to Q&A. Feel free to, I'll keep the screen open, use some of the screens to answer the questions. And yeah, so feel free to keep the questions coming. So I'm going to answer one question from Andrew, which is around how do we resolve unknown cookies? So great question there. How Privado does it, which is kind of our unique offering, is for every cookie, we have the best source resolution. So for every cookie, we will tell you the source. which means you will know the vendor which sets the cookie, right? So we know these are the uncategorized cookies in Privado right now on this website. We don't know the categorization. We haven't categorized them in OneTrust, but we know the vendor. So I know this cookie is set by Google Tag Manager. We also know the data it contains. It contains unique identifier. So most likely this is an analytics cookie, right? So, or this one, this is TTP. This is by TikTok ads. Again, this will be, or this one is Google Tag Manager, first party, GCLAU. So most likely analytics. So you can look at the vendor and from there very easily categorize. The thing is, like, categorizing cookies, there's no one right way, but what will help you the most is to figure out who really sets it. Is it set by us itself? And what's the data? So for example, I know these two cookies are set by the website. They are security token. So most likely they are strictly necessary because I need it for my security purposes, right? Whereas the other one is Google ad, that's tracking advertising, right? So that's how you do it. So um, that's how our customers have also done it. It basically, the main insight is to not rely on if the domain is first party or third party, but look at the script, look at the vendor which is doing it. All right, so there's another question around how does Privado ID third party? Actually, I kind of answered the question, but some cookies might be seen as a third party, but based on the contract, there might be some certain limitation. So yeah, again, like as I said, to answer your question, we don't really differentiate looking at the domain of the cookie. If it's first party or third party alone, of course you have that. We really go into actually tell you which vendor is setting the third party. And once you know that, then you can add all the insights on top, right? So that's how we differentiate. There are more stuff, of course, like if you go to the third party tab, you will see all the third parties that are firing on the page. And then you'll also know if there's a cross-border flow. So when we scan from UK, the data went to US, so it's flagging that. For each one of them, if you want to know what data goes to TikTok ads, you will also see that all the actual data flows. So you'll know these are all the data points that are going to TikTok ads. That's also very unique. You can look at from a third party perspective. You can look at from a data element perspective as well. So for example, we know some cookies are going to TikTok Ads Manager. That's something that you can see here. Or IP address is going to Cloudflare. So you can see that as well. Uh, Finally, I think one more unique thing about Privado is you not only see the inventory, you see things based on action. So if you want to know, show me only the things that happen on my website when a user rejects cookies, right? So let's say I want to see only UK, you filter that, and you want to only see reject when a user has rejected. Then you get this view. 11 cookies are firing. These are all the cookies. These are all the categories of those cookies. These are the vendors that are firing. So you get complete insight. So I know there are a bunch of other things like looking at local storage, session storage. You get a script panel. You get if a script is doing fingerprinting, has certain risky permissions. All of that insights you get. So it's a very powerful scanner to help you comply with all the website auditing requirement. And I know we have like probably 5 minutes left. So what I'm going to do is focus on the questions. There are a lot of questions in Q&A, so I'm going to try to answer as much as possible, and then also give it to Rob wherever you can share. So the question is, are scan results downloadable to feed into some compliance processes? Yes, you can download Excel. You can also push them to Jira and other tools, so that's possible. Um, Rob, maybe this you can answer what would be the elevator pitch to the CFO, given that they've already spent on a consent tool like OneTrust. Like, how can they justify having another scanner like Privado?
Yeah, I mean, how do you prove it works? I mean, I would say that's the biggest issue here that Privado solves. It's evidence. It is very, very difficult to have a qualified team go through 20 domains or more and determine if you have the evidence and gather the evidence that you're aligned to these requirements. And the minute that you're not, each and every person that opts out, but you didn't really opt them out, becomes a potential fine. They just add up. So this is, if anything, an outstanding insurance policy to have that you can prove to your own internal teams, assurance and audit, that you are aligning to these requirements. And nothing is 100%. Let's just be frank. I mean, I will do the scans. I don't 100% rely on any one tool. I'm going to go and double check and use other things just to be careful. And that if you can do that, great. But I don't know of any other tools that are going to let someone that's on the legal team or someone on the CFO's team scan a website and get a report that you're aligned or you're not aligned. I just don't know of anything else that, unless you're a super technical user, and you've got years of experience managing these things, you're not going to be able to know if your tool's working or not. And so I would,
And that's then the FT salary also, right? So that, you can, uh, you'll end up spending money on your own manual hours
oh yeah,
also.
yeah, the
Yeah.
cost of the lawsuits. I mean, look, there's so many people out of compliance that, just getting one of these lawsuits is going to cost you money, probably pay for the cost of Privado anyway. I don't want to encroach on your revenue though. Like, like, we won't go into that. But the fact is, just having to answer a lawsuit costs money. So if you'd have nothing for them to sue you over, then you're going to save that. In my belief and understanding and experience.
Awesome. Perfect. So I'm going to answer all the few questions quickly. We will send the recording later so you can forward it to your marketing team. A typical scan takes a few minutes. If it's a large website, can take 10 minutes as well. If you have a lot of jurisdiction, so it might take more. So whenever you run a scan from every geography, we're going to run literally scan 4 times. One as a user, which says no, takes no action, rejects, accepts. So at least 3 tests per geography. So if you select more, then more, but typically a few minutes per geography is what we see. Um, so there's a question around Google efforts on allowing site and device fingerprinting. I think that's going to increase headaches for people, and that's why we already have this fingerprinting features here. So we already tell if certain scripts are doing fingerprinting, what's the potential. So we will catch that as well. So we have a solution for that in Privado. Another question is there a solution to detect trackers smuggled through minification or web packing? Yes, absolutely. You will see that. You will see the script which is minified and through where that tracker is calling. Because here's the bad thing about website and the good thing. The bad thing about websites are scripts can do so much on the website. Like on the browser, they have a lot of control. Before like starting Privado, I didn't have an idea how much control they have. The good thing is there is all the traces also they leave, so you can always audit. So there is there's all of those minification cases, malwares are detected in Privado. Um, so the question is, as our past scan histories kept, or can we compare to see progress or introduction of new issues? Yes, we will show you trend. We don't maintain exact scans, but we will show you the trends of how things are changing. Uh, so yeah, thanks, Discard, for the positive feedback. No longer you're going to spend time in the Google console. I'm happy to hear that. And then I think this is the last question, but happy to take more. Feel free to add that. Are there any implications to doing the free scan? Not really. I mean, you will get the results, and then yeah, the only implication is you might have to do a little bit work to make your website compliant, but in my opinion, it's better to know and then fix it versus not knowing and getting a lawsuit. So, or whatever, like a plaintiff suit. So there's no implication. You'll get it. The data gets deleted as soon as the scan finishes and the report is shared. All right. There is one question targeted to you, Rob, which is or addressed to you, Rob, which is how valuable is auto blocking OT for the team that are struggling to remediate?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple ways you can run the OneTrust tool. You can have Google Tag Manager do all the blocking if that's how you want to arrange it, but oftentimes you have to use a separate team for that. I've had great results with the auto block. It's difficult though, because finding the sources, categorizing all the cookies is difficult. But if you have an unknown cookie, it may be best to just categorize it as targeting. And that way, when people opt out, they're going to drop the cookie. And if it has some horrible effect on the site, by the way, you should always run this all on a staging site. I wouldn't recommend just putting this into production without testing it. That's very important because you don't want to mess up any of your lead flows or any of the key functionalities on the site. But typical products are going to show up. Adobe products, Vimeo, things like that. OneTrust scanner is going to pick all that up. The unknown things may be old cookies that nobody even uses. So if you did categorize them as targeting, great. And then automatically OneTrust will block those. Well, it doesn't always work though. Sometimes those sources aren't available. And you could use a tool like Privado to scan after you've done your work. And it might show you that, oh, this cookie continues to fire even on opt-out. And here's the source of that cookie. You can grab the source from Privado, go to the OneTrust tool, add the source next to that particular cookie, and then do your test again, and it should block. So I've had great results using auto block. It depends on the company. If you're tightly using Google Tag Manager and have people that want to run it that way, you might have to do that. But it is interesting that there are these multiple methods to do it. But overall, I would recommend it, especially for a smaller site. I do use it here at ZoomInfo for a number of the subdomains, and then we use Google Tag Manager for others.
Thanks, Rob. We are on time, and that was the last question as well. I like to thank everyone who joined the webinar and asked so many questions. It was very engaging. And thanks, Rob, for sharing your feedback and your experience. I think it was a great session. And thanks for joining. Bye, everyone.
Thanks so much. Have a great week, folks.